Okay, welcome back everyone. We've reached that stage where we're going to start unpacking the molds. Our molds have set up and our plaster is cool to the touch and also hard. You will also probably be able to see here that my fingernail just, I hope you can see that. Maybe we can try to get a glancing view of it. There we go. My fingernail just leaves a mark in the surface. It's still a bit soft. It could certainly set up a little bit more, and that might not be a terrible idea. But the bottom line is, it's looking okay. I think for the purpose of our experiments here, for the purpose of this demonstration, we can go ahead and unpack these molds. We can go ahead and take the castings out of them. Now, I'm going to talk about these one at a time. At some point I might just grab the whole tripod and camera and move it right over here at the table so you can see some of this more effectively. But I wanted to be able to sort of chat with you again. I'm going to start with this finger mold, the first thing that we cast. And I'm just going to go ahead and tear away in this instance. I'm going to go ahead and tear away the cup to reveal the actual finished mold and plaster, plaster cap that's currently on top of it. Now, what we want to do is carefully extract that piece. Now it's really quite wet. I can feel that it's actually still quite soggy. And I want to be careful. I'm opting to use a blade to just cut through my alginate here and start to just loosen it up a little bit. A finger is a pretty sort of like heavy-duty, durable thing to kind of cast in plaster. But the truth is, in previous classes where we've done things like cast our whole hands, when we go to remove those plaster cast hands from the alginate, we frequently, if not always, break off fingers. We can't really wait too long for the plaster itself to set because it's just going to continue, as I said, to draw moisture from the alginate. And at a certain point, if it just sits there in its own sort of like slime, a coating of water sits on the surface of that plaster and makes it weak. So what I'm going to do is just delicately start kind of cutting away at this mold. I'm just kind of curious, and I may cut into it a little bit. It's an experiment. The bottom line is you're trying to sort of take your time and work somewhat delicately. My hope was I could extract it from the mold without breaking it off of the little base that I made. So you can see I've already started, and I may have already popped it. The thing is right where the mold meets, or this kind of little cap of plaster meets the finger that's inside of there, the cast finger, it can crack very easily at this stage. So I'm going to go ahead and try to extract it from this mold without breaking it off. I could, at this point, just choose to let it sit a little longer, but I want to finish these demonstration videos, give you guys a chance to see the entire process without holding you up too much. We always do this relatively fast in a regular classroom demonstration as well. We try to do it all in one class. So, the truth is, I almost always end up breaking the thing I'm casting during my demonstration just because I'm trying to do it in a relatively short period of time for you. Now we're making progress. I'm going to just continue to use my little knife to kind of fillet my way off the cast finger inside. And we'll see if we can be kind of cool if I could just reveal for you some little profile of the finger. We're getting closer. I'll give you a little update view. There I am carving away at that little sort of like plaster puck with a finger that'll eventually be coming up out of it. All right, here we go. And I have to be careful how aggressive I am with the removal of the material, because if I go too fast and too hard, I am likely to break the finger. Oh, this is looking really good. All right. Let's see if we can't get in there and expose a little more. And you can see how awesome it is. You can see I'm starting to expose the finger. And if we get the light just right, you might even be able to see the fingerprints on that finger. We'll do that in a moment. But that's me starting to kind of reveal. See if I can even pull this. Got to be careful. If I pull too hard, I could potentially snap that finger right off the base. So we'll keep at it. There we go. Nice. Okay, making good progress. Good. Awesome. Okay. Really getting there. I wonder even if I can slide it off now. Beautiful. So, there's my finger sticking right up out of that little puck. Hopefully you can see some of the details on there and just how much of the detail it really sort of memorizes. Easier, I guess, here with the fingertip and some of the lines on the finger. So that's what's possible. You can see the wrinkles in my finger. Super hard to get just the right view. But anyway, there is our cast finger revealed. Now what I want to do next is unpack one of these other pieces, but I'm just going to quickly move the video camera up here closer to the table for this. Okay, get it right down here on our work. Okay, I like the way we're centered. And let's try and sort of do the next one. There's the work we just did. Here's all the alginate parts. This is all of the remains of the waste mold. This is why it's called a waste mold, because we literally just carved it off of the object. There is a little look into the actual mold now that it's been carved away from the cast object. I'm going to just get rid of that material. And we want to look now at one of these other molds. Now, everything is still in pretty delicate shape. If I let that casting sit for a while, it's going to be better. It's going to be in better shape. It'll harden over the days. If I wanted to do something like do a little carving into it with like a little tool, this is a good time to do that. These first day or two is a good time because the plaster is still relatively soft, and it takes a while for all of the moisture to leave, to evaporate. It'll eventually become quite light because all that moisture will have evaporated out. Now, I wanted to return and look one more time at this gear-shaped little ring that we were casting. And one of the things I wanted to remind you about was the fact that this ring has these little recesses, these hollow areas. In fact, it's a cast object. It's a cast plastic object. And the walls on it are super thin. They're not particularly thick. Now, I've got to be honest with you. Plaster that is cast so thin doesn't do very well when you're trying to remove it from the waste mold. If we had cast it so only the solid side went down into a mold and cast a solid object, it would have been one thing. But we've actually used our mold to try and capture some of these thin walls, and that's probably going to give us some trouble. So just want to say up front, I think our experimental mold is probably going to be a little problematic. I hope I'm opening the right one. What I didn't think to do was actually mark them. So what I'm going to just do very gently is try and separate this. Oh, no. I've got the wrong thing. This was the little fishing lure. So this is actually looking quite interesting. You can see this is the little access. Let me see if I can change that. Too high. This right here is the little access port for the plaster that I carved. This is the little fishing lure. And you can probably see there's some places where the plaster ran out in the cracks of the mold. I'm going to treat this pretty roughly. And I'm going to go ahead and just peel it right out. I'm going to see what we get. Oh yeah, look at that. Not bad. A little bit of kind of not so useful material. But we ended up with kind of an interesting object nonetheless. You can see the seam where actually our mold was torn in half. You can see the little column where we actually filled up the plaster. Now you would have to carve that away and smooth out the top of the head of that lure. That sort of little detail of the eye on that fishing lure is great. And you can see that I totally broke off. It didn't even cast. The little lip on that lure didn't even cast. So there's a little experiment with a three-dimensional object. Now, I don't remember which one is the ring. So I'm just going to try this cup, and we'll keep going for it. I think this must be it. So there we go. I've pulled our mold out of its cup, out of its container. You can see there's still quite a bit of moisture sort of coming out of there. I'm going to do the same thing. Again, not expecting kind of like spectacular results, but I'm kind of just excited to see what we've produced with this in the round effort. Now that is not terrible. Okay, we've got a few cracks, a few places where when the mold flexed, it kind of broke. And because these are hollow walls, I am not so sure what kind of effect we're going to get. You can see as I flex the mold, do you see how I'm sort of breaking the object? I break the object as I flex the mold. So I'm not going to get it out of there whole because I'm too impatient because I'm demonstrating. But yeah, you can see I'm already breaking up. See how the walls are actually intact but coming apart in my fingers. Pretty hard to get anything that fragile to set up in the mold, but kind of cool that we have all these components. And frankly, if you were compelled to do it, you could save them all, let them really dry out, and then glue them back together. That would be possible. Really interesting results. Okay, there's a little sort of like section that I've just kind of peeled off. We'll lay it down like that, relatively intact. This is something you could reassemble if you were inclined to do so. Pretty hard to get it out of the mold intact. It's just going to remain so wet in there, and those walls on that object are so thin. A much better way to cast this would just be to have this side up, this side down, the side without the vacancy, without the hollow area, just right down into the surface of the alginate and cast into that. But it's still a remarkable looking mold and quite an interesting lesson that we've learned from that process. Some really neat little objects, little components there that we could potentially sort of activate. The bone is the final one. Again, I'm doing this while it's still a little wet. This probably, I'm running out of daylight, but I wanted to kind of get this done. This one also likely to kind of come apart when we pull the mold. Oh, no, better, much better. I don't know how it's going to do when we try to extract it from the mold, but there's part of the bone. Let's see, I'm just going to peel off a piece here. And you can see with that effort, with that pressure, I'm snapping parts away from other parts. So that part of the bone and the carved out part, I snapped. Let's see what it takes. Not bad. Didn't lose much. There is a little section of vertebra that was cast from that bone. So a little piece, little fragment of bone, almost like a fossil, that came out of that mold. There's a few little random pieces like this that could literally get glued at some point back on to the vertebra, but a really interesting result. Very smooth, beautiful surfaces that sort of like that are recorded from that bone. Just a little bit more patience, and I think you could get a lot more out of this process. And now we can even start to kind of dream into the way our things start to get assembled and used. Oh, look, there's actually a little mark. There's actually a little cavity right in there that allows that to fit right on top. Got a little, well, I think probably the hollow side is the more interesting side. Can start to kind of play, assemble our object. That'll come later. That's the next phase. But anyway, you can see how the sort of plaster objects come out of the mold. This is what we're shooting for. Obviously, something as robust as a finger or this type of an object is ideal. You'll want to sort of like be a little bit patient, but also not be afraid to experiment. It might be okay if you come out with objects that are partial. The next phase of this assignment, as I just mentioned, is going to be that you start to experiment with the cast components of your casting. Working with the cast experimental components of your personal symbols. So a couple of very interesting things there, done quite hastily and quite experimentally. If you can, if your objects allow it, really focus on things that can kind of be pressed into the mold and then easily pulled out and cast. You'll get the best, most refined results. These other types of experimental endeavors, like trying to break apart molds and put them back together and pour, are going to be a little bit more challenging, but certainly worth exploring. I hope this has been useful and helpful. I'll look forward to kind of any kind of questions that you may have about the mold making and casting process. Do remember, this is a first phase, kind of an experimental phase of working with these materials. You should probably come back and do a casting and mold making class with us if this captures your imagination and you can see yourself using this in the production of your work. Eventually you'd be able to use casting and mold making to generate multiples and not just these individual one-of-a-kind objects. There is real refinement in these objects, as you saw in the finger and in the lure. So let's see what you can do with it. All right.